carers in this country are kind of below the surface, if you like, of people's everyday lives. But there's an awful lot of them out there. Do we know precisely how many people are sort of officially registered as carers in this country?
Well, you're right to say it's often kind of below the radar. It's something that happens behind closed doors very often, but it's really something which many of us are doing. So the last time we had a census question on this was 2011, and that suggested there's about 6.5 million people providing unpaid care.
Yeah.
But recent surveys, including our latest research, suggest that number could be a lot higher and really creeping up to the sort of 7 million, 8 million and more mark. And our research, which was particularly about people who are combining their paid job with looking after a loved one, shows that the numbers of people doing that are rising even more quickly. So 1 in 7 of the workforce are now combining their paid job with looking after someone.
Right, and there's a sort of double strain, if you like, I suppose, isn't it?
Yes, it's very stressful to be kind of managing those two things. You might very often be doing it at a distance. So if you don't live with the person you're looking after, you're sort of herring up the motorway at the weekends or constantly on the phone, and that's very stressful to be pulled in those two directions.
Sure. And when you say unpaid carers, does that mean unpaid in the sense that they're not doing it as a sort of as a job, as it were, caring for somebody because it's their job to do so? Are they paid in any other way? I mean, can they claim a sort of carer's allowance or anything like that?
Yeah, so we're talking about sort of family and friends who are looking after loved ones unpaid, and people who care 35 hours a week are able to claim the carer's allowance benefit, which is just under £65 a week, so it's very low, and there are restrictions of how much you can kind of earn in a job at the same time as getting that. Right,
so if you are in a job and you are, say, caring for an elderly parent or something like that, you're unlikely to probably even qualify for a carer's allowance, are you?
Exactly. So it's just sort of over £100 a week you're able to earn alongside caring. So.
And is it a case of sort of a lot of sandwich generation situations here where, people sort of who are my age, I suppose, in their 50s are looking after parents who might be older while still having younger kids to bring up as well?
Exactly, yeah. So we've seen particularly working carers very often tend to be in their kind of 40s and 50s, and as we are kind of having children later and happily our parents are often living longer, we're seeing a lot more people in that, as you say, sandwich generation where you might be sort of being pulled in many directions between younger children, older parents and keeping up at work.
Right. And your organisation, Carers UK, is calling for employment rights to sort of formally recognise the needs of carers. How would that work exactly?
So we're encouraging employers to really recognise this as a really important issue and to think about the culture and policies they have towards people combining work and care. But we specifically think that government should bring in a right to 5 to 10 days paid time off work to care. And I think I would also like to point out that the support at work is kind of one side of the coin, but the other side is being able to access good quality social care services for the person you support. So you've got that backup of good quality social care.
So if you were able to get, say, up to 10 days paid leave to be a carer, that's not really going to help you much, is it, if you're sort of full-time caring for somebody?
I think it can help people. So we can see that lots of people are using up all their annual leave to provide care, getting really exhausted. So we think it's important that people are able to take that time to arrange appointments, to accompany the people they care for to appointments, to put provisions in place. It's not going to be enough time off for everybody, but we think it would be a good source of support for people. And as part of the research, we asked kind of workers in the UK if they were juggling work and care, what would they want? And the top response was they'd like a supportive employer or line manager. Secondly, they'd like a bit of flexibility, and thirdly, they'd like that option to be able to take some short-term paid time off work.
Yeah. I mean, presumably there are some people in these situations who, because of, say, for example, some acute problem that pops up with one of their elderly parents, they might need to take a chunk of time off, or indeed just give up the job altogether in order to care full time for them.
Yep. So there is some emergency leave in place, but lots of the support that people get from their employers is really down to the discretion of their employer. So that kind of supportive culture is really important. And we do need to put in support for people who want to return to work having left to be able to do so, because it's very difficult if you've left work in your 40s or 50s, perhaps your caring roles come to an end, but then you're looking to get back to work. And as we're all increasingly being expected to work later into life, you can be left with a real kind of gap in your pensions and your long-term financial security if you're not able to get back in.
No, absolutely. And for a lot of people as well, what is the alternative, for example, if you are working and you're raising a family but you've got to care for an elderly relative? What choice do you have other than to give up your job if they need full-time care? I mean, presumably you can think about putting them into a care home, but that's expensive.
Yeah, so there is some support from local authorities who are responsible for providing social care services. So it's good to approach them and see what the person you look after might be entitled to. But as we've seen over the last kind of 10 to 20 years, really that care has been heavily rationed, and lots of people are having to kind of pick up the financial cost or the practical costs by picking up the care themselves. So we'd really like to see the government recognise that social care services are essential for, they're almost like an infrastructure that we need to allow us to work, and that needs to be taken seriously when we're looking at social care funding.
Well, it seems like a problem that's not, if not only not going away, getting much, much worse, isn't it? We've heard the government talking about reforming, in some ways, sort of community hospitals, perhaps, and moving elderly people out of mainline hospitals where they're occupying a lot of beds that are needed for other people, but they can't be moved into social care because there isn't any. You know, it's a massive problem at the moment.
You're right. There's definitely a push towards more care in the community, but the social care funding crisis, really, that we've had over the last 10, 20 years has not been addressed. We've seen sort of government after government duck these difficult questions, and it's really time that the government brings forward some proposals to put some sustainable funding behind social care.
Exactly right. And so how about this? What do you think from Stretch, who's tweeted this in? He said, I'd change the minimum wage for care workers, Mike, because the care home owners charge a fortune and the greedy people are getting very rich. I mean, that is also a problem, isn't it, that the commercialisation of private care homes is making an awful lot of people rich and costing a fortune to a lot of ordinary families.
I think there's lots of issues with the way the care sector is operating. I think lots of providers are actually struggling because local authorities have reduced the amount they will pay for care places. So I think care providers, professional care workers who are often on very low wages and unpaid carers are all looking for some sustainable solutions from the government, and it can't be ducked for any longer.
No, quite. I'm going to talk to some people now who are involved in caring for others, because it is really, for me, one of the more forgotten jobs that people do in this country, to very little adulation, to very little praise, and it's a not easy thing to be doing. Let's talk to Marion, who's called in from Rotherham. Hello, Marion.
Good morning, Mike.
Morning. Thanks for calling, Marion. What would you like to say?
Oh, I'm so exhausted.
I bet.
I'm so exhausted, and I used to hear carers bleating on about how difficult it was, and I used to think, oh, all they do all day is drink cups of tea and sit there with somebody. And it's just not like that at all.
No, I bet. It must be. I mean, I'm in absolute awe of people like you, Marion, who do what you do, because it's so difficult and you have to make so many sacrifices that you must hardly have any time for yourself.
I don't really have much time for myself at all, no. And constantly, if I'm not in the house with my brother, I'm constantly worrying about him. I'm worrying who's knocking on the door. Yeah. I'm worrying if he's falling over.
Right.
You know.
And did you have to give up work to do what you're doing?
Yeah. Yeah, I did. I did give up work. It wasn't a hugely well-paid job, but it was full-time with overtime, so I had a decent standard of living.
Right.
And these days, if something wears out like a bra even, I find it a struggle to stretch the budget to buy the basics.
And what about the social services? Do they have any sort of input at all? I mean, what can you get from them?
I feel like they're too busy ticking boxes and filling out forms and asking invasive questions, and they don't seem to understand. They don't seem to listen. And of course, carers like myself, I'm sure the people will say, they see somebody being cared for by a family member, and while you're there, you're put upon constantly. You'll do this, you'll do this. And you are forgotten. You are most definitely forgotten.
Yeah.
I mean, I know nobody owes us a living. It's just that when it is absolutely impossible, I mean, the government are on my back to go and get a job as well as look after my brother.
Yeah.
And I only have 24 hours in a day, and I am so sleep deprived because of having to do things, and people don't realise just how much is involved in this.
What sort of day do you have, Marion? Could you sort of describe your day? Like when it starts, when it finishes?
Well, it's he's got. My brother has. He had a stroke 15 years ago, quite simply because he had unchecked blood pressure. He worked full time. He used to go around delivering televisions to people, and he had a social life and lots of friends. And then one day, a bleed in his brain caused him to be long-term disabled. So he can just about shuffle around his house, and he tries to be independent, but he cannot cook for himself. He can't do his own shopping, laundry, all these things. And it's extra hard. I mean, I know there's people with families and children and they have jobs, and they must wonder why we think it's so difficult. But the hardest thing is when, at the moment, we have to have nurses coming in the morning to administer antibiotics.
Right.
Because he's developed an infection, because he's developed, through lack of mobility, diabetes, even though I've tried to keep his diet sensible. With him not being active and mobile, his metabolism is causing him to have this diabetes, and then he's developed foot ulcers.
Oh, goodness.
So it's currently being treated with strong antibiotics. So the nurses will come in the morning every day, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Most of them are very good. But some of them let the others down by coming in, administering the meds, not changing his dressings on his feet, and then when I'm chasing him up, I get mouthed at. I actually get nurses saying, "Oh, we haven't got enough staff, we haven't got enough staff."
Right.
And all I think is, my brother's going to lose his feet because of budgets, and that adds to the aggravation of the situation.
No, of course. And what would make it easier for you as an individual, just as a sister caring for a brother? I mean, obviously there's money, which would be helpful, but I mean, what else would be helpful?
It would just be helpful if everybody involved in my brother's care, from the podiatrist who caused one of the injuries to one of his feet, if every single person did the job that they are actually paid to do and did not have the stress from and pass the stress on, if they didn't pass their stress on to us as well. Because they come in and they seem to have the impression that we're just sitting watching telly, drinking tea all day, and like the house has got a bit grubby, and it's just because you run out of time in a day just through chasing up people. So for me, it's just proper support, not tick box support, not pretend support, not this social services rubbish where they tell us we've got no money in the budget, and they go, oh, well, you don't need this and you don't need that, you've got your sister. You know, poor man's stuck in house, he's only 61 years old, he's not old. And I started doing this, violins out, when I was 40.
Wow.
You know, I was living with a man who was a useless pig, like, as it happened, but I left him because I thought, oh, you can replace a bad boyfriend, but you can't replace your brother.
No, exactly.
You know.
I bet you haven't had time to replace the boyfriend, though, have you?
No, not at all. I mean, I have had a couple of people ask me out, and I think, oh no, I've got too much on.
Yeah.
You know.
I know. I bet you haven't had a holiday recently either, have you?
No. Don't get time off.
It's amazing. Listen, Marion, I really wish you all the best. Thank you so much for telling us your story, because it's very, very untypical, I would say, of almost everybody else's life who does not care for someone. You can't really understand what it's like. Let's talk to Lorraine, who's in Chelmsford. Hello, Lorraine.
Hello there, Mike.
Hi, thanks for calling, Lorraine. What's your story?
Oh, well, my dad's 86. He has dementia, and his mobility is very bad. He's 24/7. He can't be left on his own because of the dementia and because he's high risk of falling. So my sister, I had to give up work. I cut it down first, so just a couple of days. But to be honest with you, I was so exhausted after. I'm
sure. And how were they understanding at all at work about what you were doing?
Well, they were. But the thing is, if you're tired, and actually I was a carer in the community. So I was caring as a job and as for my father. But my sister and I, we have him half a week each. So we share it 3.5 days each. So,
and is that in his place, or does he come to you?
Well, because he's got dementia, he literally doesn't know where the toilet is.
Right.
We do bring him to our houses to get out, change of scenery, but he doesn't know where the toilet is. So every time he gets up, he would literally go to the toilet in my cupboard. He would open any door and just go.
Yeah.
So you have to literally take him to the toilet, and also he could fall.
Right.
So he sleeps at his own house.
So he's able to spend the night on his own?
No, you can't leave him.
No, okay.
You couldn't leave him. He's literally 24/7. You can't. If you were to go out of the room, you don't know what he'll do.
So you probably can't even properly go to sleep, can you? Because you're worried he's going to get up.
Sleep with one eye open.
Wow. It's an incredible. I mean, it's an incredible thing that you're.
Sorry.
I'm just saying, it's an incredible thing that you're doing. It's such a sacrifice.
Well, it is, because I have a family. I still have my own home.
Yeah.
And I have a family as well. And my family's life, really, my whole life, my social life, and my family's life evolves around my father, and likewise for my sister.
Yeah. And do they? I know this is not meant to sound like an awkward question, but do they resent that sometimes, that you have to spend so much time with him?
Well, if they occasionally you'll get a look.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm very fortunate that my husband's very good. But you do get a look. You know, you do get the look. And I don't want to put my father on them, if you know what I'm saying.
No, of course. But it's very.
They're only young, and they should be enjoying themselves and not worrying about it.
Of course, but I mean, you're also.
You have a guilt thing. You have a guilt thing for your family, and you have a guilt thing for your father.
Mm. And of course, you know, it's a thankless task you're doing, Lorraine, isn't it? Really, because you're not winning anything here.
Well, at the end of the day, my priority and my sister's priority. I mean, we get him out of bed. Yeah. We wash him, we dress him, we shave him, everything. My thing is that he's always clean, obviously. He's shaved. We put cream on him so his skin's all moisturised. We make him look nice. Yeah. And we keep him happy.
It's a great thing you're doing. It's a great thing. I don't know if I could do it, to be honest. You know, I'm just not sure I could.
Well, when he goes, I had a wonderful mother and father. My dad worked 7 days a week for us. He brought us up, and we could have put him into a care home, and we actually looked, but because he's got dementia, it would have meant that he would been put on a first floor, and be surrounded with other people with dementia. He wouldn't have got the one-to-one because there's obviously too many of them. Mm. He wouldn't have been able to find himself to the toilet or anything. Yeah. And so he would have been betrayed, and he would have felt betrayed and actually rejected, and I just couldn't have that. I couldn't have looked at my father in the face.
No, of course. Well, Lorraine, it's people like you that keep this country going, actually, because, as I say, without you, I don't know what it would be like for people like your dad. But thank you so much for calling in and talking to us, Lorraine in Chelmsford. I mean, some of these people literally are saints. They really are. I can't imagine how hard a job it is to do that kind of thing. I mean, I sit here and talk rubbish for 3 hours. Well, it's not rubbish most of the time, hopefully, but you know what I mean. It really is puts life into perspective. I want to hear from more of you, though. 0344 499 1000 is the number, because the carers of this country really are the backbone of this country, and maybe they should get a little bit more help.